And the Manhattan Institute?
Yes.
And now the Heritage Foundation?
Yes, yes.
And every single one of those groups is funded by the fossil fuel industry. Is that not true?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of being able to rely on a family fortune made in the Minnesota gas business or having my spouse's family fortune come from United Gas. And the Heritage Foundation is a club that anyone can join, not just white people.
Dr. Furchtgott-Roth, welcome back to hearings with me. As you know, you're a frequent flyer here in the halls of Congress, and I think always called by the Republican side, and with an astonishing range of expertise. My review of your testimonies is that you've testified on subjects as diverse as the capital gains tax, the challenges of the 21st century workplace, Chief Justice Roberts' record on women's rights, education reform, the Paycheck Fairness Act, residency and right to work issues, medical bankruptcy reform, Samoan fisheries subsidies, the gender pay gap, a balanced budget amendment, that the Affordable Care Act would lead to high unemployment rates, that to help older workers find jobs, we should roll back the Affordable Care Act, eliminate EPA regulations on coal, and approve the Keystone XL pipeline, on sequestration, on health insurance, on taxation, on empowerment in the workplace, on job vacancies, on the American Rescue Plan telling employees not to show up for work, and on a range of climate-related issues. Is that a pretty fair summary of the breadth of your testimony across various congressional committees?
Yes, I'm fortunate to have been able to write 6 books, hundreds of articles. I've been chief economist of the Labor Department, the equivalent of chief economist of the Treasury Department, and chief of staff of the Council of Economic Advisors.
Yeah,
so I've had a lot of experience.
That's in your resume, and you
yes, and,
worked before for the American Petroleum Institute. Is that correct?
4 years at the American Petroleum Institute, but
and
unfortunately,
then you worked at the American Enterprise Institute. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the Hudson Institute.
I did work for the Hudson Institute.
And the Manhattan Institute?
Yes.
And now the Heritage Foundation?
Yes, yes.
And every single one of those groups is funded by the fossil fuel industry. Is that not true?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have the benefit of being able to rely on a family fortune made in the Minnesota gas business or having my spouse's family fortune come from United Gas. And the Heritage Foundation is a club that anyone can join, not just white people. During 2021, it had hundreds of thousands of individual, foundation, and corporate supporters representing every state in the United States.
Do you know how much funding it received from the oil and gas Baron Koch Industries political operation?
The top 5 corporate givers provided the Heritage Foundation with only 1% of its 2021 income. Individuals contributed 82%, foundations 12%, corporations 1%, program revenue and other income 5%.
Well, the answer is that it's over $5 million from the Koch's various foundations since 1996, from Donors Trust and Donors Capital Fund, which are the great pass-throughs for the fossil fuel industry, to obscure their role. Heritage has received over $2 million. It's received nearly $750,000 from Exxon since 1998. In 2019, Heritage reported on its tax return that its various direct mail, telemarketing, and fundraising efforts were responsible for 19 of the $117 million it received. Can you explain where the other $98 million came from?
As I said, we have hundreds of thousands of individual donors, and I have been writing, as you point out, the same things throughout all my career as a professional economist, beginning in 1985. And what I write doesn't depend on where I work.
You wrote, for instance, in a Forbes column last year that renewables actually increase global emissions. Do you stand by that comment?
Yes, because they are made with coal-fired power plants in China. I did explain that if renewables the wind turbines and solar panels are made, and batteries are made with coal-fired power plants in China. I did explain that if these were made with emissions-free energy, such as nuclear power, then the benefits to the environment would be much greater. But many environmentalists who are in favor of renewables are against dense emission nuclear power, and therefore making these renewables often raises emissions.
In addition to
especially
stating that
batteries.
renewables actually increase global emissions, have you also agreed that recent data, and I quote here, calls into question the conclusion that humans are the dominant cause of recent climate change?
I'm an economist, not a scientist.
Well, you wrote that for a Wall Street Journal opinion piece in 2015.
Yeah, well,
You
scientists...
stand by it here today in 2023.
Yes, scientists disagree on the human component of global warming, and in this book, Unsettled by Steve Koonin, who was Undersecretary of Energy under President Obama and who taught for 30 years at Caltech and has a PhD in physics from MIT, he says that it is uncertain how much human activity affects global warming. The case is unsettled. And I'm no better scientist than he is.
Well, thank you very much. It's notable that that is the position that the Republican Party intends to stand by.
I just have to talk about Russian disinformation, because the people peddling it are not on my side of the aisle. Senior Democrat leaders, including Ranking Member Peters, were involved in a process of creating a false intelligence product that was supposedly classified. They leaked to the media that accused Senator Grassley, the President pro tem of the Senate, and myself of accepting and disseminating Russian disinformation from Andrei Derkach. I'd never heard of the person until they brought it up. Senator Peters introduced that false information, Russian disinformation, into our investigation record. 50 people associated with the intelligence community after our Hunter Biden investigation and the revelations of the Hunter Biden computer said, oh, this is Russian disinformation. Now we find out, no, it's a real investigation by the Justice Department. So it's just galling, and I just have to point out that the purveyors of Russian disinformation, Hillary Clinton's campaign, the DNC, the Steele dossier, the Ranking Member Peters accusing Senator Grassley and I of disseminating Russian disinformation, that's where the disinformation is coming. That's where the false information, the lies, the false allegations. I can't sit by here and listen to this and say that this is not disinformation, this hearing today. This is getting information we have to take a look at to restore confidence in our election integrity. We're not going to be able to just move on without bringing up these irregularities, examining them, and providing an explanation, and see where there really are problems so we can correct it moving forward. Senator Paul.
Mr. Chairman, I got to respond to that. I mean, you're saying I'm putting out information. Well, one, it had nothing to do with this report.
You lied repeatedly.
I did not.
You lied repeatedly in the press that I was spreading Russian disinformation, and that was an outright lie, and I told you to stop lying, and you continue to do it.
Mr. Chairman, this is not about airing your grievances. I don't know what rabbit hole you're running down.
You talked about Russian disinformation.
Down rabbit holes.
Senator Paul.
This is simply not what we're dealing with. Well, Mr. Chairman, you can't make these false allegations and then dropping it there. That is why this committee needs to return back to its partisan things. This is terrible what you're doing to this committee and all the great work that you talked about.
It is what you have done to this committee.
It is not
falsely accusing the chairman of spreading disinformation. Nothing could have been further from the truth, and you're spouting it again, which is why I had to respond. Senator Paul.
Mr. Chairman.
Judge Storm.
This is outrageous.
Judge Storm. It's been.
First, I want to address what happened in Israel just a few weeks ago, and want to absolutely, in the harshest way, condemn the terrorism committed by Hamas, period. Some sentiments do not need a comma. What Hamas did was terrorism, period. And that says nothing about what the Palestinian people not affiliated with Hamas deserve. I also want to say that as Israel defends itself, which it has an absolute right to do, as a country that respects the rule of law, they also have a responsibility to protect and look out for innocent life, period. And that does not say anything about the Israelis' right to have a Jewish state. It just says we all expect that we will look out for innocent people. I also believe that at home, we have to look out for Jewish, Arab, and Muslim Americans who are unfairly being targeted as anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is on the rise. And that's something this committee can work on collectively. Also, as leaders in the Congress, we all should think about the space that must be created once the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is addressed to create a two-state solution where both the Israeli people and the Palestinian people can live in their own peace and have their own economic prosperity. And we should all strive to do that in the coming days, weeks, and months. Chairman said at the top, as far as the Iranian people should be separated and distinguished from the regime. Mr. Greenway, you work for Heritage, is that correct?
It is, Congressman.
They're your employer.
They are, Congressman.
And you work there because you support their mission.
I do, Congressman.
And at the top, Chairman Green, who I commend for his statement, said, the freedom-loving Iranian people who are suffering under the repressive regime, that we must recognize we cannot essentially paint an entire population with one brushstroke. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I agree, Congressman.
On October 19 of this year, the Heritage Foundation tweeted out, the Palestinian population has no interest in assimilating into American culture and governance or in expressing loyalty to America or our allies. To import a population of Palestinians would be certain suicide for Americans. Do you denounce that tweet, Mr. Greenway?
I don't denounce it. I agree that there's a threat that constitutes open borders and immigration policies without control, Congressman.
You don't believe that casting a broad stroke and essentially associating every Palestinian with Hamas is in direct conflict with what the chairman said at the very top?
I think everyone coming into the country needs to be fully screened and vetted so they don't constitute a threat, Congressman.
Do you believe every Palestinian individual is affiliated with Hamas?
No, I don't, Congressman.
Well, then why can't you denounce the tweet?
What I agree with, Congressman, is that everyone coming into the country needs to be fully screened so that we don't constitute an unsatisfactory threat to the United States.
On the same day, Heritage tweeted, America should not all capitalized, resettle Palestinians. To import a population of Palestinians would be certain suicide for Americans, again implying that any Palestinian who would come to America would bring violence. Do you denounce this tweet?
I think anyone coming into the country needs to be fully screened and vetted, and it's the policy of the neighbors of Palestine itself not to accept additional refugees.
So I don't disagree with you. I don't think anyone here disagrees that every person who comes here should be vetted. I don't support open borders. I don't know a single Democrat here who supports open borders. What I want to know is why you cannot denounce the idea that every Palestinian should be treated as if they're a member of Hamas.
I think everyone comes into the country, Congressman.
We're not talking about border security. We're talking about the sentiment tweeted that Palestinians, every single one of them, if they came here, would be certain suicide for Americans.
I think we've got an unacceptable risk of individuals crossing the country that have been screened and vetted, and it's a threat to every American, Congressman.
Okay, assuming you screen a Palestinian who comes here, do you believe that Palestinian should be treated as a member of Hamas?
I think everyone should have the same applied threshold of screening and security before they enter the United States. It's not currently happening.
Do you know that Heritage